General Hospital spoilers reveal. The reunion in Dubrovnik marks far more than a simple collision of past lovers. It represents a seismic shift that alters the entire trajectory of Jason and Britt's intertwined fates. For years, both were written off as casualties, Jason buried beneath the wreckage of a Greek tunnel and Britt struck down by the poisoned hook of Heather Weber, yet destiny has proven neither story to be complete. Now, as they face each other in the grandeur of the Five Poppies Hotel, the weight of shock and disbelief floods the air, and with it comes the undeniable realization that nothing will ever return to the way it once was. The very sight of Jason disrupts the delicate web Britt has woven for herself, a web spun out of secrecy, fragile deals, and a hidden plan that was never meant to be disturbed. His arrival acts like a stone hurled into still waters, sending ripples of chaos outward until every corner of her carefully constructed existence trembles under the strain. Britt has spent her time in hiding, mastering the art of control, tethering her survival to clandestine arrangements that shield her from powerful enemies, perhaps even from the shadow of her father's legacy. Yet Jason's presence immediately threatens that equilibrium, because he has always carried an aura of disruption, an instinct for truth that pierces through deception and forces hidden motives into the light. Every step he takes closer to her in that hotel lobby feels like a tightening of a noose around her plan, each glance a reminder that her secrecy cannot coexist with his determination. The shock of their reunion is more than emotional, it is strategic, political, and deeply dangerous. For Britt, Jason's reappearance means the risk of exposure, the unraveling of alliances, and the collapse of a structure she has fought desperately to hold together. For Jason, the discovery that Britt is alive sparks a fire of questions that will not easily be extinguished. Why has she hidden herself away? What binds her to this place, to these dangerous figures lurking in the background? And most importantly, why does she still look at him with the same unspoken connection they once shared? Every element of this reunion feeds into a growing storm of complication. The emotional pull between them, raw and undeniable, collides with the practical barriers of survival and secrecy. Britt's private plan, designed to protect her and perhaps even others, is suddenly at risk of collapse because Jason's very existence in Dubrovnik creates vulnerabilities she cannot afford. It is as though two opposing currents have met in the same river. One carrying the weight of Britt's survival strategy, the other carrying Jason's relentless drive for truth and connection, and their collision creates turbulence that neither can control. This is why the encounter becomes not just a story of love rediscovered, but a story of lives destabilized. The shock is not only in the reunion itself, but in the realization that every choice from this moment forward will carry consequences magnified by Jason's return. For Britt, the burden of her hidden agenda grows heavier, as every glance at Jason reminds her of the possibility of losing everything she has fought to protect. For Jason, the joy of finding her alive is tainted by the looming threat that his presence may place her in greater danger than ever before. In this sense, the Dubrovnik reunion is a crucible, burning away illusions, forcing hidden truths closer to the surface, and proving that passion and peril are now inseparably bound. The life Britt has carved for herself begins to bend under the weight of Jason's reappearance, and the life Jason thought was gone forever suddenly roars back to confront him with choices neither of them are ready to face. It is a collision that changes not only their hearts but the entire balance of secrets and dangers that surround them, ensuring that from this point on, nothing can remain the same. Jocelyn's presence in Dubrovnik is turning into a fault line that threatens to split open everything Jason and Britt have been forced to confront. What began as a covert WSB assignment has become something far more dangerous, because her mission intersects with secrets that were never meant to be uncovered. For Britt, who has struggled to survive by binding herself to a shadowy existence and following the suffocating rules of her hidden benefactors, Jocelyn's sudden arrival is more than an inconvenience, it is a catastrophe waiting to happen. Every move Jocelyn makes, every adjustment she attempts in order to fulfill her cover story, brushes up against the fragile structures Britt has been clinging to, and it pushes the entire situation toward collapse. Jason sees the danger clearly, even if Jocelyn does not. He recognizes the look in Britt's eyes when she realizes that the young woman is staying under the same roof where her own secrets are buried. The reunion between Jason and Britt should have been a private, emotional confrontation, an intimate reckoning with survival, love, and betrayal. But instead it is clouded by the constant fear that Jocelyn's cover will shatter or, worse, that she will stumble into the orbit of the men who control Britt's life. Jason has always been protective of Jocelyn, treating her as family, but now that protective instinct collides with Britt's urgent warning, Jocelyn cannot stay in Dubrovnik. The plea Britt makes for Jason to take Jocelyn away reveals the depths of her obsession and fear. She knows too well how easily enemies can use the innocent as weapons, how quickly a simple encounter can turn into a deadly trap. Jocelyn is young, fearless, and clever, but her mission has left her blind to the invisible chains that bind Britt. The mere fact that she is walking through the same hotel corridors where Britt is being monitored threatens to pull both Jason and Jocelyn into a danger they cannot comprehend. For Britt, the nightmare is clear: if her keepers discover Jason's return and Jocelyn's involvement, none of them will escape alive. This moment becomes a turning point, not only for the three of them but for the story itself. Jason, torn between the fierce need to protect Jocelyn and the overwhelming pull of Britt, finds himself trapped in an impossible dilemma. He cannot abandon Britt, not after discovering she is alive, but neither can he leave Jocelyn exposed to threats she cannot even see. The demand forces him to confront the reality that passion and survival are now at war, and that every choice he makes could cost him someone he loves. Jocelyn, for her part, begins to feel the weight of something far darker than her mission. She does not yet understand the full scope of Britt's entanglement, but she feels the tension vibrating in every interaction, the paranoia that clings to the walls of the hotel like a constant shadow. Her instincts tell her that the assignment is spiraling out of control, that her presence is no longer simply a cover story but a liability to both Jason and Britt. The illusion of control she had at the start of her mission is slipping away, replaced by the cold realization that she has stumbled into a battle between loyalty, secrecy, and obsession. Britt's obsession with removing Jocelyn is not only about protection, it is also about control. Her life has been dictated by others for so long that she clings desperately to the few choices she can still make. By demanding that Jason take Jocelyn away, she is attempting to wrest back some measure of power, to reassert authority in a situation that has spiraled beyond her reach. But beneath the demand lies something even more fragile: fear that history will repeat itself, that Jason's loyalty to others will once again tear them apart before they even have the chance to rediscover what they once shared. The walls of Dubrovnik become a crucible, pressing these three lives into collision. Every conversation is laced with double meaning, every glance shadowed by paranoia. The air is thick with the weight of unfinished love, suppressed secrets, and a looming danger that grows sharper by the hour. Jason's return has reignited a spark between him and Britt, but that spark is surrounded by a storm that could consume them all. Jocelyn's presence magnifies the tension, proving that this is not just a reunion of passion but a battlefield of survival, where one wrong move could expose everything. In this way, the story evolves beyond romance or even survival. It becomes a story of obsession, sacrifice, and the cruel irony of fate. Jason and Britt must navigate not only their own emotions but the perilous landscape of betrayal and hidden agendas, all while Jocelyn unknowingly treads closer to the heart of the danger. The more Britt insists that Jocelyn be removed, the clearer it becomes that the reunion in Dubrovnik is not a blessing but a ticking clock, counting down to an explosion of secrets that none of them can escape. The reunion in Dubrovnik was never meant to last, and deep down both Jason and Britt knew it. The first moment their eyes locked across the lobby of the Five Poppies Hotel, the world seemed to stop, and for a fleeting instant it felt as though death had been cheated and destiny had given them a second chance. Yet even as their hearts recognized one another, the shadow surrounding Britt loomed larger than ever. She was not the same woman Jason had once tried to protect. She was living under constraints, tethered to forces she dared not name aloud. Her every movement carried the weight of invisible chains, and her every glance was shadowed by fear of what would happen if she lingered too long in Jason's presence. It was this reality that made their reunion as fragile as it was powerful, because the very love that drew them back together also threatened to pull them apart. Britt knew that to stay near Jason would mean exposing him to the same dangerous world that controlled her. She had worked too hard to maintain her secret existence, to negotiate the compromises that allowed her to live, however precariously, under the watchful eyes of those who monitored her every move. The web of deceit and coercion that surrounded her would only tighten if Jason tried to pull her out, and she feared that his relentless nature would make him a target the moment he stepped into her orbit. And so, in spite of every longing in her heart, she chose to part from him. The goodbye was not spoken with finality, but with the heavy silence of a woman who believed she had no other choice. To walk away was to protect him, even if it meant sacrificing what remained of her own happiness. For Jason, that choice was unbearable. He had already mourned Britt once, had already carried the crushing grief of believing she was lost forever to Heather Weber's poisoned hook. To have her return to him now, only to watch her walk away again, felt like a cruel twist of fate that he could not accept. Jason had always been defined by his loyalty, by his refusal to abandon the people he loved, and Britt's departure did not sever that instinct, it intensified it. The more she pushed him away, the stronger his resolve became to follow her, to reclaim her from the shadows, and to bring her back to the life she deserved. Their separation was not the quiet, peaceful kind. It was a fracture laced with desperation, with Britt's trembling attempts to convince Jason that this was for the best, and with Jason's silent vow that he would not let it stand. In that moment, an obsession took root inside him, one that would haunt his every decision from then on. He had not been given a second chance with Britt only to let it slip through his fingers. Whether she wanted it or not, Jason was determined to bring her home. The days following their parting would prove how deeply this obsession had embedded itself into Jason's soul. Back in his room at the hotel, he could not sleep, replaying every look, every word, every sign of fear in Britt's eyes. He thought of how she had once laughed with him, how she had once trusted him with her vulnerabilities, and he compared it to the haunted woman he had just seen. He knew she was hiding something monumental, something that bound her in a way that no one else could understand, and the thought of leaving her behind in that condition gnawed at him like a wound that refused to close. Even Jocelyn could sense the shift in him. Though her mission demanded focus and precision, she watched Jason unravel into something colder, more single-minded than ever. He had always been a protector, but now that protection had transformed into fixation. Every action he took in Dubrovnik was laced with the unspoken promise that he would find a way to reach Britt again, no matter what the cost. Jocelyn, caught between her duty and her loyalty to Jason, feared that his determination might lead them all into a trap, yet she also understood that nothing could dissuade him once his mind was set. Meanwhile, Britt herself wrestled with the consequences of her decision. Alone in her carefully guarded suite, under the eye of Pascal and the unseen boss, who dictated her life, she felt the weight of what she had just done. She told herself it was the right choice, that Jason's safety depended on her silence, but the ache in her chest betrayed her. She could still feel the warmth of his presence, still see the look in his eyes when he realized she was alive, and the memory haunted her with every passing hour. To push him away had been an act of love, but it also became its own form of torment, because she knew that Jason was not the type of man who would ever truly let go. This is what turned their parting into more than just a farewell, it became the spark of a dangerous pursuit. Jason's vow to bring her back was not something that would fade with time. It would grow, festering into a relentless drive that consumed his thoughts and defined his actions. It was no longer about simply protecting Britt or even rekindling what they once had. It was about reclaiming something he believed fate had unfairly stolen from him, and that belief became an obsession as potent as any love story. In the grand halls of Dubrovnik, their goodbye echoed like the closing of a door, but beneath that sound was the opening of another, darker path. Jason could not walk away, and Britt could not truly let him go, and together they had set themselves on a collision course with forces larger than either of them had yet faced. Their story was no longer about reunion or even survival, it was about obsession, sacrifice, and the lengths to which Jason would go to bring Britt back, even if it meant placing himself and everyone around him in greater peril than ever before. And so the cycle continued, a love story transformed into a pursuit, a reunion twisted into an obsession. Jason and Britt had parted, but their lives were now bound tighter than ever, caught in a web of secrets, danger, and unspoken longing. The true tragedy was not that they had said goodbye, it was that neither of them could truly escape the other, no matter how far they tried to run. Jocelyn had always believed that her assignment with the WSB was dangerous but manageable, a mission she could handle with her instincts and sharpness, but in Dubrovnik the walls of control began to collapse the moment she stumbled upon a secret that was never meant for her eyes. Hidden within the shadows of the Five Poppies Hotel and buried beneath layers of coded language, classified orders, and whispered names, Jocelyn uncovered a truth about the WSB that turned her world upside down. What she learned was not simply another operational detail, not just intelligence to be reported back to her superiors, It was a revelation that proved the agency she trusted was far more entangled in the web surrounding Britt than she had ever imagined. The discovery did not liberate her, it consumed her, igniting an obsession that grew stronger with every hour. This obsession was unlike anything she had experienced before. At first, it manifested as restless thoughts, the gnawing question of why the WSB seemed to know more about Britt's situation than they had admitted. She began to notice small patterns she had overlooked before: Vaughn's reluctance to answer her questions directly, the evasive tone in Brennan's reports, the way every mission detail seemed designed to lead her toward the same hotel where Britt was hiding. Once Jocelyn put the pieces together, she realized she had not been sent to Dubrovnik merely as cover for a marriage ruse. She had been maneuvered into a position where she would collide with Jason and Britt, a pawn in a far larger game. The secret weighed on her heavily, and as it did, her obsession grew. She could not stop replaying the documents she had glimpsed, the encrypted names tied to operations, the suggestion that the WSB had known Britt was alive for months, perhaps years. If they had hidden this from Jason, from Anna, even from Sunny, then what else had they concealed? And if Britt was a piece on their board, was Jocelyn herself just another disposable pawn? Her obsession soon became more than intellectual. It was emotional, personal, and consuming. She began to imagine the danger stretching out in all directions. If the WSB had plans for Britt, then what did they intend for Jason? Was his very survival orchestrated as part of their larger schemes? Did her presence here mean she was being used to leverage him, to trap him, to control him? The more she asked herself these questions, the less she could sleep, the more her nerves frayed, and the harder it became to separate truth from paranoia. The obsession drove Jocelyn to shadow Jason and Britt even more closely, desperate to understand whether her suspicions were real. Every time she saw Jason look at Britt with that mixture of relief and determination, her chest tightened with fear, because she knew he was walking into a danger that none of them had fully comprehended. Every time she caught sight of Pascal lingering in the hallways, keeping watch with his cold, detached stare, she wondered whether the WSB had planted him there, whether he was an agent disguised as Britt's guard or a mercenary on their payroll. This is how the obsession began to reshape her. What started as a mission quickly turned into a personal crusade, an all-consuming determination to expose the truth, no matter how deep the betrayal ran. It wasn't just about protecting Jason anymore, nor was it simply about helping Britt escape. It was about reclaiming her own agency, proving that she would not be manipulated by the very institution she had sworn to serve. Her mind circled endlessly around the secret she had uncovered, growing darker and more restless with each new possibility, until it seemed as though everything in her life was now defined by it. The higher the obsession climbed, the more reckless she became. She began to consider crossing lines she once thought impossible. Breaking into Vaughn's communications, intercepting transmissions, even defying direct orders. She knew that to do so could cost her career, her freedom, even her life, but the fire inside her burned too brightly to be extinguished. The WSB had lied, and if they had lied about Britt, they could lie about anything. That truth was intolerable, and it set her on a path that would either expose the agency or destroy her along with it. In this way, Jocelyn's obsession mirrored Jason's own growing fixation with bringing Britt home. Each of them was consumed by a truth they could not ignore, by a fire that only burned hotter the more they tried to contain it.